Hey guys, welcome back to another video of Frosty Explain. This is another episode of the series What If As Was Mewtwo. So it's episode number 8 of the series, and if you are new on the channel and you are watching it for the first time, you should check out the description for the playlist section video, or you could go to the playlist section for watching it playlist. It's absolutely on the top, so you will not find it any difficult to search for it. So today is going to be on the cerulean city, as his team has already passed the uh, future city and he got the gym badge. Now he's going for the cerulean city. In between he had already covered the Mount Moon. He got an adventure and now he's going for the second gym badge. So without any more delay, let's begin today's episode.
The group had set up camp for the night as they were still a good while from reaching Cerulean City. Ash was at the moment spending as much daylight as he could to train his Pokemon. He looked in the sky to see Pidgeotto trying to learn Steel Wing again. This time he was doing it at normal heights since the last time he ended up learning Aerial Ace. It wasn't a bad thing, but Steel Wing would have been useful in the battle against Brock. Pidgeotto, try focusing more energy on your wings. Maybe that will help. He really wanted to have Pidgeotto learn the move since he thought of a new combo move for the bird Pokemon to use. A combo of Quick Attack and Steel Wing, or he could use the newest move in the combo. Steel Wing combined with Aerial Ace. Pidgeotto looked down and nodded to his trainer. Got it, Ash. He focused on the energy he usually used for Wing Attack and pushed more into it. He charged at a tree and left a gash on the trunk. One of many, as he had been practicing this move. Ash moved over to Oddish and knelt down. We worked on your evasiveness last time, but I think you should have some more moves to use. Oddish nodded as she was ready to learn something new. Ash thought about the grass moves he knew and Oddish could learn before he thought of one. Okay, I want you to focus your energy on learning Bullet Seed. Focus on the grass energy you have and condense it into a small ball in your mouth. Once you think you have it, try and shoot it out at a target. We can work on accuracy once you get it. Oddish nodded before trotting away so she can practice. Ash then looked at both Eevee and Pikachu, who were looking at him with excited eyes. Ash got into a thinking pose before he snapped his fingers. I want both of you to attack each other with your tails. If we can train your tails enough, we can get you both to learn Iron Tail. Eevee and Pikachu looked excited to learn the move before they looked at each other with determination in their eyes. They nodded before going off to a clearing to start. Pikachu called out to Eevee, first one to learn the move gets to be groomed again. Eevee looked taken aback at the declaration before she shouted back in anger, you still haven't given me my turn. The two charged at each other before hitting their tails against each other. Eevee spun around and swung her tail to hit Pikachu in the head, but the mouse blocked it with her tail. Pikachu angled the tail before she used it as a pole and pole vaulted herself in the air and flipped over Eevee. She landed before spinning around and almost hit Eevee in the head but missed since the fox Pokemon took a few steps back. They then re-engaged in their tail duel of the fates. Ash sweet dropped at how into it the two were getting but chose to let them have their fun. As long as none of his Pokemon got extremely hurt, he would be okay with it. He moved over to sit down next to Metapod. Sorry I haven't let you out. I realized that for Pokemon like you, you just need to be out and wait until you're ready to evolve. Metapod shimmied a bit as his eye turned to him. It's okay, Ash, it shouldn't take too long until I evolve. He looked at the other members of the team as he spoke as excitedly as he could. I just can't wait to train with the others. Ash smiled as he patted the top of Metapod. I'll think of ways we can train later on. The two sat there and watched as the others continued their training. Aveline and Brock were comparing notes on Pokemon care, with Aveline asking about his thoughts on Pokemon diets. She looked up from a little notebook that she was writing tips in. What would you believe should be put into food requirements for a psychic Pokemon? And what do you have for tips on taking care of them? Brock finished writing some notes on Pokemon care that Aveline had told him and looked up. I assume you have a young psychic type if you are asking for specifics such as that. Well, it depends on their nature and age. In general, Pokemon can change nature after some time or they could stay the same nature. Young Pokemon need the most attention with their diet since depending on their diet, it could alter their progression. For psychic Pokemon, several berries should be added to their diet to develop their abilities. Sure, psychic Pokemon have mental abilities that are said to be stronger than humans, but if poorly taken care of, they might have weakened psychic powers. So here are some berries to add to their diet, and these can also help with their skin or coat. He gave Aveline a list of berries and mixes that he knew to help with psychic Pokemon, though he did say that he still has a lot to learn about different types of Pokemon. Misty was slumped on a stump as she knew that they were really close to Cerulean. Why couldn't he take the long path and skip Cerulean? Brock looked over to Mitty to see the depressing look the girl had and looked over to Ash, seeing that the boy was far enough away and more focused on training his Pokemon. He chose to check up on Misty. He excused himself from Aveline and moved over to the redhead. "You okay?" Misty jumped a bit as she was so focused on trying to come up with a reason for them not to go to Cerulean that she did not notice the other gym leader. "Hey, Brock." Brock sat down next to Misty and asked, "So why don't you want to go back to your gym?" Misty nervously chuckled as she flailed her arms around. "What makes you think that I don't want to go back, and why are you asking me that? Why wouldn't I want to go back? What gave you that idea?" She rapidly asked, trying to cover her discomfort, but the look Brock gave her told her that he wasn't falling for it. "Misty, Aveline, and I already know that you don't want to go back. I don't think Ash knows since he seems a little dense when it comes to clear signs. The only thing we don't know is why you don't want to go back." Misty sighed as she brought her knees up. "I just don't want to run into my sisters. When I left, I said that I would come back after I became a great water Pokemon trainer." Brock nodded as he could understand that reason. But it also didn't make sense since from what he heard, the Cerulean gym was well known for their skill of using water Pokemon. If that was the case, Misty should already be known for being a good water Pokemon trainer. He tilted his head as he asked, "But that's not the only reason, is it?" "The real reason was I just wanted to get away from them since I was always compared to them no matter what I did. I got a lot of relief after I left since I didn't have to hear anything about my sisters and how great they are." Brock nodded. He may not have dealt with this kind of issue, but he could understand that Misty wanted to be out of her sister's shadow. He looked up to where Ash was and watched as the boy was giving instruction to Oddish. "So why aren't you telling Ash about you being the gym leader?" Misty looked over to the boy and watched for a minute as he finished with Oddish and moved to Eevee and Pikachu. "I guess it's because he's a good guy and I don't want him to see me differently. I noticed that when people knew I was a gym leader, they either try to battle me in a way of stroking their ego or try to brown nose me. Ash just treats me like a stranger and I guess I just like that." Brock smirked as he said, and he still owes you a bike." Misty's solemn look turned to a glare aimed at Ash. "That too?" Brock chilled at that as he got up and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I don't think Ash would care if you're a gym leader. He knows I am, but he doesn't change his attitude around me." Misty nodded as she did see his point. The two were broken out of their thoughts as they heard Aveline call out to Ash. "Ash, time for your examination." Ash looked back at her as he called back, "Already?" Exclamation mark. "But can't I just keep going?" Ash didn't receive a verbal answer from her. Instead, he saw the look she was giving him and he chose not to argue. He was about to turn to his Pokemon to tell them to keep training while he was in the middle of his thing, but he suddenly felt something hit his back, causing him to fall to the ground. Aahhh. He landed face first on the ground, causing his Pokeballs to fall off his belt, and felt something using him as a mat. It was the voices that told him that it was Pikachu and Eevee. "Unless you let me have a turn, I'm not going to do it again. But I said that whoever got it first would get her turn. But neither of us have gotten it yet." Ash felt the two wrestle on his back as if he wasn't even there. He grumbled as he felt one of them, Eevee, he guessed based on the furred paw that slipped in front of his face before she jumped off and pushed Pikachu off his back. He got to his feet and turned to see the two rolling on the ground. He would have thought they were really fighting if it weren't for the smiles and laughs coming from them. He sighed as he chose to let them have their fun and turned back to the camp to see his Pokeballs scattered on the ground. He looked at them for a minute before he picked them up and clipped the 5 of them to his belt. He never had Pikachu's since she hated being inside it, which brought something to mind. Which one is Eevee's? He looked at the Pokeballs in his hand until he remembered that in a sense it didn't matter. As long as the Pokeball is empty, any of his Pokemon can take them up since the Pokeballs are registered to his Pokédex, so they would all work. He chose to put a random ball into his bag along with Pikachu's since Eevee stayed out the same as Pikachu. He took his belt off and clipped the balls to them as he began to walk over to Aveline. After Ash was finished with the examination, he looked over to see that his Pokemon were all tired from their training. They weren't able to learn the moves they were trying to learn, but that was fine. Okay, everyone. Time to get some rest. Pidgeotto was laying on the ground and lifted his wing as he groaned out, "Got it." Ash chuckled at this and grabbed his pajama shirt as he turned his head to where he left his Pokeballs. Right next to them was Brock, who was putting away his cookware. "Hey Brock, can you do me a favor and return Pidgeotto and Oddish, please?" Brock stored away the frying pan as he nodded. He grabbed 2 Pokeballs and brought them up to return the 2. He figured Ash didn't want to return Metapod so that the cocoon Pokemon could evolve. He pressed the button to enlarge the ball and started to return them, or at least he did to one of them. Oddish returned to her ball as everyone expected, but the other ball burst open, releasing a Pokemon. Misty, Brock, Aveline, Pikachu, Eevee, Metapod, and Pidgeotto looked shocked to see that a new Pokemon came out of one of Ash's Pokeballs. Brock looked towards Ash as he asked, "Hey, Ash, when do you catch a Sandshrew?" Ash was putting the shirt on as he heard this and paused. He was confused with the question and poked his head out as he answered, "I didn't." He looked over to Brock to see a Sandshrew shaking his head as if to clear it of something. Sandshrew finished shaking his head. "Who feels weird being in one of those?" He looked around to see that everyone was staring at him. He raised a claw and smiled, "Hey." Ash got his shirt on and walked over to the group. "Is this yours, Brock?" Brock shook his head as he lifted Ash's belt. "No, it came out of one of your Pokeballs." Ash tilted his head as he looked down at Sandshrew. "I don't remember catching one. I didn't even have time to catch any Pokemon since Team Rocket decided to mess with the Moonstone." Pikachu and Eevee got up and moved over to the new Pokemon with Pikachu looking at him closely. It was then it clicked, "Hey wait. You're the Sandshrew we met at the entrance of the cave." Sandshrew nodded, "Yep. That's me." Eevee stepped forward before sitting next to Pikachu. "Well, what are you doing here? How did you get inside one of Ash's Pokeballs?" Sandshrew looked up to Ash before looking at the other 2 Pokemon. "Well, after I got a drink and left, I thought about what it would be like to travel with a trainer. I haven't had the chance to go out of the cave, but I was curious. So after some thought, I went back, hoping to find you there. But you guys had already left. But you guys left the water bowl and one of the Pokeballs behind. Thinking of a way to get you to let me tag along, I put the ball in the bowl and carried it over my head as I looked for you. Took me all day and some help from some of the Clefairy telling me that you saved the Moonstone and where I could find you. I made my way. Once I found your weird shelter, I used my nose to tell me which one he was in. I tried to get in but had no luck, so I decided to put the bowl down and took the ball out. I looked the ball over trying to figure out how to get it, but when I tripped and fell on it, it opened up and I found myself inside. After that, I slept until you opened it." Ash listened to all this and thought about when he had left the Pokeball at the entrance. It seemed difficult for him since for some reason he could only remember the fear he felt when he was around Seymour. Sure, he remembered that he was afraid of the guy, but he couldn't understand why. He seemed like an okay guy and was a bit goofy, but nothing about him seemed to stand out on the cause. Everyone sans Ash couldn't understand what the Pokemon were saying, and she looked to Ash but saw that he was trying to think about something. Choosing to make things a bit more clearer, she looked to Pikachu. Pikachu, can you explain what happened and how this Sandshrew became one of Ash's Pokemon? Pikachu crossed her paws as she thought about how to explain it to the humans. She looked at Eevee and then the Sandshrew as she came up with a way to explain how it happened. She looked to Eevee and asked, "Can you pretend to be asleep over there so I can try and show them how this happened?" She pointed at a spot just a few feet away, which Eevee nodded and moved to the spot before laying down and playing her part. Pikachu then looked around to find something to represent the Pokeball and bowl. She decided to use a rock and leaf for them as she moved to pick them up. She then looked to the trainers and began her charade. "Okay, here we go." She grabbed Sandshrew and pointed at him. "Okay." She grabbed the leaf and put the rock on it before putting them over her head, found the ball and bowl before he began to look for us to give it back. She walked around in circles before she began making her way to Eevee. He then found out where we were and brought the things back to us before putting it in front of the tent. She put the rock and leaf down next to Eevee, who peeked open her eye at the items. Pikachu then grabbed the rock and placed it down before flopping onto it. Then when he put the things down, he chose to jump into the ball and captured himself. Ash got out of his thoughts as he listened to Pikachu's explanation. He understood that it was for the others and chose to explain. "I think she said that Sandshrew found the bowl and Pokeball and brought it back to us, and when he did, he caught himself inside my Pokeball." Pikachu brought up a sign with a circle on it. "You got it." Misty put her hands on her hips as she smiled, asked, "You can really understand your Pokemon, can't you?" Ash chuckled nervously as he rubbed the back of his head. Well, I've been around Pokemon all my life, so I guess I just got good at understanding them." He then looked to Sandshrew. "So do you really want to come with us? We can probably still go back and leave you at the mountain." Sandshrew nodded. "Of course. You seem like an interesting trainer and there is something about you that Sandshrew suddenly found his mouth being sealed shut by Pikachu, Eevee, and Pidgeotto. Pidgeotto looked up to Ash as he nervously spoke. "Ash, shouldn't you be getting ready for bed?" Aveline could guess that the Pokemon were keeping Sandshrew from saying something that could cause an issue, so she chose to move things along. "Ash, it's time for bed." Ash slumped as he was being babied not only from Aveline but his Pokemon as well. "Alright." Brock laughed as he decided to add his 2 cents. "Also, I would suggest you put on some pants." Ash looked down to see that he had not yet put on his pajama pants. Seeing this caused him to blush and move away. Misty blushed as well as she shook her head. She still hasn't gotten used to this. Pikachu looked at Sandshrew with an amused look. "You have chosen a very interesting trainer." Sandshrew tilted his head in confusion as he had no idea why they were all acting in such a way. Sandshrew was staring at the Pokemon that had replaced his new trainer. He was told about what kind of trainer he now had, but it was still hard to believe. But the proof was right here. Pikachu nodded as she patted him on the back. "Yeah. Just know that we all are protecting him and we need to know if you will do the same." Sandshrew looked at his trainer, who was at the moment sleeping on Gardevoir's lap, as she used her powers to make sure he had a restful sleep, while Aveline was using this time to look over the notes she took from her talk with Brock. He sighed as he nodded. "To serve one related to the original one. You have my support." The other Pokemon smiled and nodded as they chose that time to go into their Pokeballs to get some sleep. They moved to the Pokeballs and entered them, leaving the only Pokemon out being Metapod, Eevee, Pikachu, and Gardevoir. Pikachu and Eevee moved over to Ash and were surprised when they were suddenly grabbed by Ash, who hugged them tightly and nuzzled into them. Pikachu grumbled as she tried to struggle a bit. "I feel like we became one of those dolls I've seen humans use to sleep." Gardevoir, who had her eyes closed, opened them and looked down at the two that were now in Ash's arms. "Ash needs some comfort and you are helping him. Please bear with it. He still feels fear from the memory of Seymour. I'm trying to soothe his mood so he can sleep peacefully. He should stop doing this soon." Eevee nodded as she tried to get comfortable in his arms. Aveline smiled at the sight as she did not see any sign of Ash becoming distressed. She chose to be a bit productive since she will still be up for some time. She pulled out a small bowl and a small smoothed-out peg along with a bag of berries. Once she had everything set, she began to crush some berries so that she would have them ready for Ash's meals later on. Meanwhile, in a dark room inside a facility, a vent covering was shoved down to the ground as three figures hopped out and landed inside. Coast is clear. Nobody here. Nothing to fear. Next day, the group had made it to Cerulean City in the early morning with most content at arriving but one looking a little more depressed. Ash stretched and smiled as he was glad they were able to make it into the city. Well, now that we are here, let's head to the Pokemon Center. Brock looked to Ash with a small bit of surprise. I'm surprised, Ash. I figured you would want to head to the gym first thing. Ash actually shrugged at this. I'm not really that interested in battling the gyms. It is kinda just a side thing I felt like doing. Brock was surprised to hear this, but as he looked shocked, Aveline spoke up. Ash isn't really on this journey to get badges. He actually wanted to go into the world and meet more Pokemon. Brock smiled as he could understand such a reason. It was something different from many of the other trainers he has met and something that was much more in tune with what he wanted. What better way to become a better breeder than meeting as many Pokemon as you can and learn about them? Misty felt a little more relief as they weren't going to the gym immediately, though she still knew that they would have to go there sooner or later. Ash shifted his bag as he looked over his shoulder past Pikachu. You okay in there? Inside Ash's bag was Metapod as they were still waiting for his evolution. I'm okay. But the stones in here make it slightly uncomfortable. Ash sweet dropped at this as he chuckled nervously. I'll send them home when we reach the center. The group continued making their way towards the center until they saw a large group of people gathered around a side of a building that looked like one of the walls was broken down. They moved over to see what was going on and saw the police trying to keep the crowd back. Ash looked to Brock as he asked, what do you think happened here? He saw the older boy about to answer, but it turns out that he was too slow. A robbery. The group looked to see Officer Jenny walking up to them. Brock gained hearts in his eyes as he fell to his knees and brought his hand to his heart. Oh, Officer Jenny. You have arrested my heart and thrown away the key. Give me a life sentence to be your partner. Officer Jenny looked a bit confused at what Brock was asking but chose to ignore him and answer the previous question. A group of people broke into the building and stole some heavy equipment. Brock gained a depressing aura as his confession was blatantly ignored. Jenny looked the group over and narrowed her eyes as she asked, why do you want to know about the robbery? Are you possibly the culprit of the crime? Ash brought his arms up in defense as he rapidly tried to defend himself. That's not it at all. We just saw this group of people and got curious, we swear. A likely story. She leaned forward to look Ash dead in the eye. Officer Jenny, what he says is true. Officer Jenny looked to the one who spoke before. Her face beamed at who it was. Aveline. Oh my god, I haven't seen you in ages. She hugged the young nurse before she pulled back and looked her over. Look at you. You've grown so much. How's your mother? Aveline smiled at the older woman. It's good to see you again, Officer Jenny. Mother is doing well as she is still busy with her duties. Officer Jenny tilted her hat as she smiled. Well, that's to be expected for her. She then saw that she was with them and understood that they were not the ones that broke in. Well, if you vouch for them, then I'm back to square one. Ash, letting his curiosity take over, asked, what was stolen? Jenny sighed as she answered, that's the weird thing, all that was taken was a giant water pump. This confused the group as they didn't understand why someone would steal something like that. Jenny then gained a stern look. Well, I have to get back to the investigation, so I'm going to have to ask everyone to leave. The group nodded as Aveline waved to Jenny, who waved back. Pokemon Center. The group made it to the center and moved over to the front desk as Ash grabbed a couple of trays for him and Brock since they had brought their Pokemon out to train a bit. Ash returned Metapod before putting the 4 Pokeballs on the tray and Eevee and Pikachu jumping right on it. Brock fell to his knees as he saw Nurse Joy and grasped his hand. Oh, Nurse. Please. I ask you to heal my wounded heart that can only be filled with your love. Nurse Joy looked confused at what he was saying before she looked at Ash and smiled. How may I help you, Ash? Ash was about to say something but was a little stunned as this Nurse Joy knew his name when he was sure that he hadn't met this nurse before. He spoke to the nurse as Brock moved to the corner with another aura of depression. How do you know my name? I'm sure that we haven't met before, have we? Nurse Joy shook her head before she bent down and picked up a package. No, but I received a package for you a couple of days ago. She placed it on the counter to show it was a paper-wrapped package with a picture of Ash's face on it so the nurse will know who to give it to. Ash looked at the return address and saw it was from his mother. It's from Mom. He took the package before looking at the nurse again. Can I send something back to her from here? Nurse Joy just continued to smile as she nodded. Yes, as long as you pay the fine and have the necessary details. Ash smiled as he now knew that he could now send his souvenirs back home. Thank you for the package and thanks for taking care of my Pokemon. It's my pleasure. She then took the tray with his Pokemon while Chansey took Brock's. Ash moved over to his friends who were sitting at a table. He placed it on the table as he began to fiddle with it. Misty looked curiously at the package as she asked, "What did you get, Ash?" Ash shrugged as he began to tear the wrapping off. Don't know. My mom sent it here. Aveline felt a little bit of mischief take over as she said, maybe it's underwear. Ash's face faltered as Misty and Brock laughed a bit at this since they became privy to this little tidbit by Aveline herself. It was becoming close to a running gag against Ash. Ash got back to his feet as he glared at Aveline. Seeing as how his glare did nothing, he chose to just open the package. Once it was open, he smiled at what was inside. It was another one of his jackets, the same one he lost during the first day of his journey. Not only that, but there were two other ones inside the package as well. One that was the exact same, but instead of white, it was black, and then there was another one that looked to have a different design than the others. He immediately put on the one that was like his first and smiled as he now could put his Pokédex in his jacket pocket instead of his jeans one. Brock nodded as he saw Ash in the jacket. Gotta say you look good, Ash. Ash smiled as he nodded at his friends. Yeah. I gotta thank Mom for this. He ran over to the phones to quickly dial up his mom. He sat at the phone waiting for his mom to pick up the phone. After a few rings, his mom's face appeared. Hey, Mom. Ash. Good to hear from you. I was starting to get worried since you haven't called in a while. Ash chuckled as he rubbed the back of his head with his free hand. Sorry. It took a bit of time going through Mount Moon, though we did get to see a bunch of Clefairy performing a ritual there. Delia smiled as she listened as Ash began to explain the ritual that he and his friends got to witness. She could see the joy he was having on this adventure, and it was enough to calm her overprotective nature. Once Ash was done, she smiled at him. I see you are having a good time while on your journey. Ash smiled as he nodded. Yeah. It's been fun. It was then he remembered what else he wanted to say. Oh, thanks for sending me the jackets. They're really cool. Delia smiled at his beaming face. I'm happy you like them, Ash. When I saw that your first one was torn, I figured I could send you a few replacements. Delia then gained a somewhat somber look as she asked, Is Aveline there? I wish to talk to her. Ash nodded as he looked over to the table and raised his hand, calling over Aveline. Here she comes. Aveline walked up to the two and smiled at seeing Delia's face. Morning, Delia. It's good to see you. Delia nodded as she did not verbally respond since Ash still had the receiver. Ash, can you let me and Aveline talk in private? Ash nodded as he handed the phone over to Aveline and began walking back to the others, but not before whispering out a plea to Aveline. Please don't embarrass me. Aveline smiled as she watched as Ash walked away. Once he was out of earshot, even for his slightly improved hearing, her smiling face turned serious as she looked at Delia. What's wrong? Aveline sighed before she began. Ash is having night terrors. Before we reached Mount Moon, he had an extreme panic attack in his sleep. I was able to calm him down, but he was thrashing around as if something was hurting him. It was loud enough that our two traveling companions, both of which are gym leaders, almost found out about him. I was able to get them to not see anything and calm Ash down with Gardevir's help. Not only that, but it would seem that Ash has an extreme aversion to anyone wearing a scientist lab coat. I believe this has to do with his creation. She sighed as she knew she would never be used to saying that. I was able to calm his panic with Gardevir's help, and it seems that he doesn't know the reason why he is afraid of lab coats and has no recollection of his night terror. Delia felt her heart hurt hearing that her baby was having such a reaction. She took a deep breath to try and calm herself down. And how is he right now? Really? Aveline gave a small smile as she answered, he is enjoying himself. I think he is enjoying himself much more than when he went to Pokemon Camp and met Serena. He just can't help but smile every time he meets a new Pokemon. And from what I can tell, the Pokemon enjoy being around him just as much he is with them. We even found a way to have the others understand what the Pokemon are saying with them playing charades. She continued to explain several other things that had happened during their journey. Ash sat with Brock and Misty with the older boy asking a question. So how was your talk with your mom? Ash smiled as he thought about the small checkup he had with his mother. It was great. She thought the moonstone ceremony was really interesting and she said she wished she could have seen it. I wish I could have taken a picture, but I don't have a camera. Brock chuckled as he nodded. Well, maybe we can get one at one point so you can take some pictures. So what are we going to do after this? Ash thought about it. He didn't feel hungry, but he felt that they could get some food before they went off to the gym. Let's get something to eat and then we can head to the gym. This caused Misty to slump in her seat as she still hasn't said anything about it. It was here that she chose to get up and grab her bag. Sorry, but I have something I gotta do. So I'll see you at the gym. Ash was confused about this as he asked, what do you need to do? We can help out if you need it. Misty waved her hand as she nervously giggled, it's fine. I'll see you later. Misty then walked away with conflicting thoughts on what to do. Aveline joined the group and saw Misty leaving. Where is Misty going? Brock got up from his seat as he began making his way towards the counter. She said she had some stuff she needed to do. Come on, Ash, our Pokemon should be done soon. Ash got up and followed the older boy with Aveline right behind him. Ash was looking at a map of the city as he and Aveline were trying to find the gym. Brock had excused himself from the group as he said that he was going to get some supplies for their journey. Eevee and Pikachu were once again on Ash's shoulder, but they were facing the other way as they were talking to Metapod, who was once again inside Ash's bag. Pikachu had the rainbow feather in her paws as she twirled it. So how long until you evolve? Metapod looked to Pikachu before shuffling a bit. Shouldn't be long now. Maybe a day or two. He then smiled. I smile, as he felt more comfortable in the bag now. I'm glad that I no longer have to sit on rocks. Ash looked over his shoulder as he chuckled. Sorry about that, Metapod. But now that I sent the stones home, you won't have to worry about it. He then looked back to the map before looking around. Okay, it should be around here somewhere. Aveline looked around before she spotted a large structure with a dugong image on it. I think that is it. Ash looked to where Aveline was looking and saw it. He looked back on the map and nodded. Yep, I think that's it. The group made their way into the building as they heard loud orchestral music and an announcer speak up. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming and being so patient. Now for what you all have been waiting for, the sensational Cerulean City Synchronized Swimming Sisters. Say that 5 times fast. Ash, Aveline, Pikachu, Eevee, and Metapod walked further in to see that it looked like a stadium with a large pool in the center. Ash was a bit confused at this as he saw 3 women on a high dive waving to the crowd before they leapt into the water before they began to do a routine swimming show. I thought this was the gym. Did we get the wrong building? Aveline pulled out the map and filled the path they took from the restaurant they ate at to the gym, and from what she could tell this was the place. It says that this is the gym. Maybe this is something that they do in their spare time. Ash shrugged as he figured that gym leaders needed something else to do while they weren't battling. He then chose to just watch the show and wait for it to end to see if he could ask who the gym leader was. Aveline put the map away and stood with Ash as the group watched the show. Something that she did notice was that most of the audience was of the male variety. She sighed as she figured why they were there. After the show was over, the group were walking down a set of stairs that they had to take since the crowd of people forced them this way. Evie, who was now laying on top of Ash's head, asked, "Who are you going to use to battle here, Ash?" Ash looked up as he answered, "Well, I'm guessing that the gym leader uses water Pokemon, so my best choice would be Pikachu and Oddish." Pikachu smirked as she sparked a bit, "Sweet. I can't wait." Eevee looked to her right down at Pikachu as she smiled, "Easy, Pikachu. Don't shock your trainer before we even start the battle." They made it to the bottom of the stairs and gasped at a hallway that was lined up with an aquarium filled with different types of water Pokemon. Ash ran up to one of the windows and pressed his face to the glass as he smiled at the sight of so many different kinds of Pokemon. "Wow, a Poliwag, a seal, look, they have a Shelter." He kept smiling at the Pokemon he saw, not noticing that a bunch of them were swimming closer to him and routing a circle around him. As he kept looking, he saw something interesting. "Wait, is that?" Aveline smiled as she watched Ash get excited at the sight of the water Pokemon, but she then heard some others coming their way. "Like that dive was like perfect, Daisy. Practice helps out Violet. Don't forget that Lily was great with her movements." "Ah, it was nothing." Ash looked to see the three swimmers from before coming their way and chose that he should ask them where he could find the gym leader. He moved closer to them and asked, "Excuse me." The three stopped and saw a boy, his Pokemon, and a young pink-haired girl that looked like a Nurse Joy walk up to them. Daisy spoke up before he could even ask, "Like, we aren't doing any autographs right now, so you're going to wait till we have an autograph signing." Ash paused for a second before, "I don't want an autograph." Violet smirked as she put her hand on her hip, "We don't do photo ops either." Ash was getting a little bewildered at how they kept assuming what he was here for. "I don't want a photo. I wanted to know where I could find the gym leader." Lily smiled as she spoke up, "Ah, then you found them." The group looked a bit stunned at this as they watched the sisters pose in front of them. "We're the gym leaders. We're the sensational sisters. We're world famous." Ash was stunned hearing this as he thought about the show they did early. So all the swimming stuff was. Lily smirked, "Like a hobby, and our fans love to watch us perform." Violet followed up, "We pool our talents to make a big splash." The three sisters then laughed haughtily, causing the group to sweet dropped at them. Ash now stood in front of the three sisters as he got ready to battle them. "I want to challenge you to a League Association battle." Aveline was sitting in the stands so she could watch the battle. The three sisters nervously shuffled their feet as they looked anywhere but at him, with Daisy speaking up. "Well, the thing is, we don't do battles anymore." Ash slumped in shock as he was not expecting that answer. "Ha." Violet gestured to her sisters and herself as she spoke, "We just got beaten 3 times in a row from this nowhere place called Pallet Town." Ash felt a tick-mark pulse on his head as heard them call his home a nowhere place. Violet spun her fingers in the air. It was like one defeat after another. "My eyes were spinning at the end of it all." Daisy followed up, "We had to rush our Pokemon to the Pokemon Center, and we can't even use the professional team since they won't listen to us that well." Lily sighed as she finished this, "We only have one Pokemon left and it isn't even strong enough to battle yet. The rest of the Pokemon we have are just performing Pokemon and have no battle experience." Daisy smiled somberly, "So there is no real point in battling." Lily brought her hand up to cup her cheek as she smiled, "So now instead of that we can focus on becoming more beautiful." Aveline was listening to all this and felt a little peeved at the way they were handling their responsibility as gym leaders. Ash sighed despondently as he figured that he wouldn't be able to battle for the badge. Daisy smiled as she figured that it wouldn't matter how he would get it. "I know what you want." She turned to the pool and called out, "Seal." Out of the pool came a seal that swam to the edge before jumping up and looked at the humans. He then stuck his tongue out with the Cascade badge on his tongue. "Here you go." Daisy took the badge before presenting it to the boy. "Here. This is what you want, right?" Ash looked at the badge as he shook his head. Well, kinda, but I don't think it's a good idea for me to even take it without earning it. Pikachu and Eevee nodded as they agreed with their trainer. Gaining something without working for it will never be as satisfying. Metapod shimmied in the bag in his own form of agreement. Daisy pulled the badge back and smiled sadly at the kid. You're more honest than the other trainers. She closed her hand over it as she spoke. This is like a sort of test that Lily thought would be a good idea to see how trainers are. Ash was a little surprised to hear this when Violet followed up here. Like, if a trainer were to try and take the badge without any hesitation, then we take it back and tell them that they don't have the right to get it. Lily sighed as she looked away. Most trainers still want a battle, but you can see them wanting to take it right then and there. Ash nodded as he understood the reasoning behind it. Aveline felt some relief seeing that the gym leaders were not just giving their badges without battling. Unbeknownst to the group, the sisters just use this as a sort of excuse, as Lily thought. Though we wouldn't mind you taking it so we can get back to our hobby. What kind of test is that? Everyone looked to the door above the seats to see Misty standing there with a glare on her face. Misty made her way to the bottom of the stands before jumping down to stand with the sisters. Ash looked at her in surprise. Misty, where have you been? Misty looked to Ash as she said, getting ready to come back here. Daisy crossed her arms as she looked to Misty. Well, fancy seeing you again, little sister. Didn't you say you wouldn't be back until you became a much better trainer? Did you fail at that already? Ash looked between Misty and the other girls. So, Misty is their sister. He looked at Pikachu and Eevee. Is that why she was acting weird all this time? He watched as Pikachu and Eevee shrugged their shoulders. Misty glared at her sister. I didn't fail at it. I was taking my time doing it. And the only reason I came back here was that he wanted to come here. She pointed at Ash as she glared at him. Ash brought up his hands in defense as he chuckled nervously. If you didn't want to come here so badly, you could have just said so. Misty fumed at this, not just because of what he said, but because she had a feeling that if she had really told him that she didn't want to come to the city, he would have likely moved to the next town, skipping Cerulean altogether. She was madder at herself for not thinking about this. She then looked to her sisters and moved closer to them so what she said would only be heard by them. That test was just so you could give them a reason to get the badge, so you can just do whatever you want, isn't it? The sisters couldn't look Misty in the eye as that was actually what it was. Misty spun around and pointed to Ash. If you still want that badge, then you better get ready for a battle. Ash flinched at the shout and nervously nodded and got ready for the battle. Ash and Misty stood at their respective spots while the sisters and Seal stood at the side of the pool so they could watch the battle. Misty eyed Ash and nervously gulped. Since she wasn't using her A-team, she knew that she would most likely lose the battle since Ash was a trainer that battled not just hard but smart. He had 2 Pokemon with type advantage and this field would only help Pikachu in this. This did not mean that she would just let him have the win without a fight. You ready, Ash? Ash nodded as he grabbed a Pokeball. Misty immediately knew who he was going to send out since Pikachu was standing right next to him and Eevee. This will be a 2-on-2 battle. First to lose both Pokemon is declared the loser. She pulled out a Pokeball and looked at Ash. Ready? Ash nodded as he pulled his arms back. Both trainers threw out their Pokeball while shouting out. Misty calls. Staryu. Go. Oddish. Both Pokemon appeared from their balls and stood on their platforms. Ready to battle, Ash. I'm here to serve. Oddish versus Staryu. Choose your battle music. Misty started the battle. Staryu, rapid spin. Staryu jumped into the air and began to spin rapidly. It then turned on its side and flew towards Oddish. Oddish didn't need a command to tell her to dodge. She jumped to the side and successfully avoided the attack, but as she turned around she saw that Staryu was continuing the onslaught. She had to dodge again and again as Staryu did not let up. Ash was a little stunned that Staryu was not giving Oddish time to gain her footing, but he had to counter. Oddish, use poison powder while dodging. Oddish continued to jump around as Staryu attacked, but she heard the command and began to let out a purple mist from her petals. She continued to do this and smiled as she saw that her opponent was being affected more with every pass. Misty gritted her teeth at this. She was hoping to keep Oddish from using any of her moves correctly, but with poison powder now taking effect, her Pokemon will lose this sooner or later. Staryu, water gun. Staryu stopped her spinning and landed on a platform before bending its top point and let out a strong stream of water. Oddish was able to jump out of the way of the stream, but it followed her and impacted her hard. Due to her training being more on evasiveness instead of defense, the hit caused a good amount of her health to drop despite it not being very effective. She didn't have to deal with it long as the water gun died down. She shook herself of water droplets before looking at her opponent and smiled. Staryu's gem began to flash as its health was dropping fast. The poison powder was taking its toll and it was now on its last leg. Misty saw that her Pokemon was about to faint and pulled out a Pokeball. Staryu, return. Winner, Oddish. Ash smiled at the round's victory. He jumped in the air as he called out, "Way to go, Oddish." The three sisters look impressed with how Ash handled the battle, with Violet speaking up. Like, he wasn't bad. Though it made sense that Misty would lose since she was at a, major disadvantage. Daisy nodded as she came to the same conclusion, she is going to lose this battle. Lily sighed as this was what they expected from their sister. Despite how Misty was the only one that was dedicating most of her time to training their Pokemon, including the A-team. The sisters didn't know why Misty really left, since the excuse of wanting to be a great water Pokemon trainer seemed odd, since Misty was, for all intents and purposes, the better trainer. In the end, they chalked it up to a Misty thing. Seal was clapping its fins while calling out, "Good battle. Good battle. Good battle." The sisters looked at Seal with Lily asking, "Just who are you clapping for?" Oddish smiled at Ash before plopping down. "Woo, I need to work on my defense." Ash smiled as he pulled out her Pokeball. "We'll work on it later, return." Once Oddish was returned, he looked down at Pikachu. "Ready." Pikachu nodded as she took a few steps back before running forward and jumping onto the platform. "Ready." Eevee called out to Pikachu, "Do your best, Pikachu." The mouse waved her tail in acknowledgement. Misty sighed as she knew that despite her next Pokemon being her strongest on her current team, she was bound to lose. But not allowing this to get to her, she pulled out a Pokeball. Misty calls, "Starmie. Ready to help." Pikachu smirked as she saw her opponent. Pikachu versus Starmie. Ash brought up a fist and called out, "Pikachu." Thundershock. Pikachu's cheeks sparked as she let out her attack that lit up the arena as the water boosted up her electric attack. Misty and Starmie didn't have a chance to counter as the eclectic attack hit its mark, causing the water type to let out a cry. Once the attack died down, Starmie slumped down with its gem flashing. Misty grew concerned about her Pokemon and knew that Starmie could no longer last. The battle was extremely short, but with how the arena was set up and the type advantage Pikachu had, it was the only logical outcome. She brought up her Pokeball. "Starmie, return." Winner, Pikachu. Pikachu blinked at the rapid victory of the battle. Despite how she won, she felt cheated since the battle ended in one move. She sat down and grumbled as she crossed her paws, "Why does my battle have to end so fast?" Ash chuckled at how Pikachu was unsatisfied at the fast victory. He looked at Misty to see that she looked confused at Pikachu's behavior. She's mad that her battle ended so fast. Misty sweet dropped at this. "Well, she has the type advantage and the water may help water Pokemon, but it also helps electric ones too." Daisy lifted her hand and called out, "Winner of the Pokemon League Association battle, Ash." Ash smiled as he watched Pikachu walk to the end of the platform, and since she was not in the mood to exert energy, she walked off it and fell into the water before she floated on her back and used her tail to slowly move towards him. "Ah, don't be mad, Pikachu. You'll get a good battle later." Pikachu grumbled as she made it to the platform that Ash was on and felt her rear bump into it. "Yeah." Ash bent down to pick Pikachu up, but as he got on one knee, the whole building began to shake. The shaking got so bad the Ash and Eevee fell into the water. Coming up to the surface, they saw that a wall of the gym shattered and showed a large machine that had a tube attached to it that moved to enter the water. Aveline, who came running to stand next to the sisters, asked, "What is that?" Misty joined her as they all looked at the contraption. "I don't know, but it looks like trouble." Trouble. Make that double. Insert motto. Ash floated in the water and looked closely at the large machine when something clicked in his mind, a water pump. "So it was you that robbed that warehouse." James flipped his hair as he pulled out a rose. "That's right. And now we will use it for a greater purpose." Meowth pulled out a remote and pressed a button, taking all your Pokemon. Ash saw the machine turn on and soon felt that the water was being sucked into it. He quickly grabbed Eevee and Pikachu with one arm and used his other hand to grab onto the platform. "Hang on." He felt his grasp slip, but he used all his strength to hold on so they wouldn't be caught in that machine. Though this was very difficult since the pull was strong. Pikachu and Eevee clenched their eyes shut as the water was splashing in their faces, and held onto Ash as best they could to stay within his arms, with Eevee biting onto his shit and Pikachu holding his jacket. The girls by the poolside watched in shock as the pool was being drained. The sisters gasped as they saw that several Pokemon were being sucked into it, as the pool had a connection to the aquarium so that they could let the Pokemon come to the field. Lily panicked at the sight as she shouted out, like, "Oh no, our Pokemon." Daisy looked to her sisters. "Can't we do something?" Violet pointed to Ash and asked, "Why doesn't he use Pikachu to shock them?" Misty shook her head as she reprimanded, "An electric attack like that will hit not just them but Ash and the Pokemon that they captured already." Aveline ignored the sisters as she watched as Ash was losing his grip. She could not allow this and pulled out a Pokeball. She didn't even make a command and released Gardevoir. Gardevoir looked around to see what was going on, and her eyes immediately saw Ash in trouble. This caused the usual happy and gentle Pokemon to see red. Aveline called out to Gardevoir before the Pokemon acted, "There are Pokemon in that machine. So be careful." Gardevoir nodded before her whole body gained a blue glow. She waved her hand, picking Ash, Pikachu, and Eevee up and moving them to be by her side. Ash breathed heavily as he was no longer out of danger. "Thanks, Gardevoir." The Feelings Pokemon nodded again before turning her gaze toward the trio. Jessie narrowed her eyes as she brought her hand to her forehead to see farther. "What is that?" James looked as well and shrugged. "Don't know, Jessie." Meowth tilted his head as he asked, "Forget dat. What's it doing?" He then felt the remote in his paws lift from them and floated in the air. "Hey." The remote had a blue glow on it before the reverse button was pressed. The hose then gained a blue glow itself and lifted out of the water with the tube still pointed to the water. Then all the water began spouting out with the Pokemon following it. "Hey, those are our Pokemon we stole," was Jessie rant. Once the machine was empty of water and Pokemon, Gardevoir moved the tube to wrap around the trio, who began to shout out complaints. She then let her psychic power go before she opened her mouth as a yellow orb began to appear before it. Pikachu shook herself free of water before she bounded to be next to the psychic type. "Let me join you. This will make me feel better." Ash got to his feet and stood by Aveline as they looked at each other and nodded. They both outstretched their arm while pointing at Team Rocket and both shouted, "Pikachu! Gardevoir! Thundershock! Hyper Beam Attack!" Pikachu charged her attack to the max and launched at the same time Gardevoir sent out her beam attack. The electric hyper beam charged at the trio of criminals as they screamed in horror. The attack made impact, causing the machine to explode and sent them flying. Jessie cried as her hair was all frizzy from the attack. "How could we lose so quickly?" James came up flying next to her. "I think we angered the wrong Pokemon." Meowth came up next. "But what did we do?" Jessie waved her hands in the air as she retorted, "Who cares what we did, cause looks like Team Rocket's blasting off again." Gardevoir calmed down as she saw the machine and the criminals were no longer a problem, so she calmed down before she turned around and moved over to Ash. "Are you okay? Anything hurt? What about your head? Are you dizzy? What about your limbs?" Ash deadpanned as Gardevoir began to fuss over him. The sisters looked in interest at the Pokemon as they had never seen it before. Misty shook her head as she asked, Aveline, what Pokemon is that? Aveline looked to Misty as she answered, she is a Gardevoir. A Pokemon from the Hoenn region that my mother brought back during one of her trips. The sisters stared at the Pokemon as they could not help but think to themselves about how such a Pokemon would be good for their show, but they specialize in water Pokemon, and from what they saw, it is a psychic Pokemon. Dang it. Daisy sighed as she spoke up, well, I'm going to call Officer Jenny for them to come here and pick up what's left of the thing. She pointed at the large destroyed water pump. This caused everyone to sweat dropped at the steaming machine. Violet looked at her watch and before she moved to her sister, well, with, like, all the stuff happening, why don't you guys stay the night? Misty was shocked at hearing this from her sister. But she smiled before looking at the others, what do you say, guys? Aveline nodded, sure, it will be easier for us. But Ash and I must still have a room. The three older sisters all gained a knowing look as they gave Ash a suggestive look. Ash had his head tilted as Gardevoir was examining the side of his head, but he was still confused enough that he would have tilted his head anyway. What? Lily giggled as she covered her mouth. Do you want us to put a do not disturb sign on your door? Misty blushed as she got what they were referring to. She stomped over to her sisters before shouted, it isn't like that. She calmed down a bit as she spoke, she is his physician and she is to make sure he is okay. It's for medical reasons. This made the sisters curious, but even they knew that some things could be personal and this seemed like one of them. Ash looked to Aveline and asked, what did they mean? Aveline was blushing before she shook her head, it was nothing. Eevee and Pikachu looked at each other before shaking their heads, with the former speaking out. Sometimes he can be a little dense. Pikachu nodded as they moved over to Ash before hopping up to his shoulder as Gardevoir had finished examining him but did not return to her Pokeball. Pikachu grumbled as she sat down and leaned on his head, well, at least he doesn't miss all the suggestive talk. Ash was still a little lost, but he chose to just let it go. Later, in the middle of the night, the gang were all in their rooms with Misty and Brock sharing one room and Ash and Aveline in another. Misty had gone out to inform Brock that they would be sleeping at the gym. Once Brock had gotten to the gym, he immediately got on one knee and began his usual flirting with them as he announced his undying love for them, only for them to immediately shoot him down. Brock had an aura of depression as he slept from being ejected by all three sisters in one go. Aveline and Ash were asleep in another room with the door locked. Aveline had already done her examination and was resting while Ash was curled around Pikachu and Eevee and Gardevoir sleeping next to him. Suddenly, Ash's eyes slowly opened with a glazed look. He uncurled himself from Eevee and Pikachu without waking them up as they were lying on the mattress. He seemed to smoothly slip off the bed as if he was a snake Pokemon before getting up on his feet. As he moved off the bed, he slipped out of his oversized shirt through the hole for his head. This motion also had him slip out of his pants and boxers as well, leaving the Pokemon in his natural state. He walked to the door and used his fingers to unlock the door and walk through it before he moved out into the hallway. Ash walked through the hall with his tail swaying slowly behind him. Though he walked in a zombie-like state as his eyes had no light in them, as if his body was on autopilot. He walked through the entire gym before making his way through the hallway that had the aquarium. He continued to walk through it before he made it to a large pool that was separate from the one that is used for battle. He stood at the edge of the pool before he leaned forward and splashed into the water. This did not wake him up though, as he was still asleep. He sunk deep into the water before he wrapped his arms around his torso, brought his legs in, and curled his tail around him. The water Pokemon that were inside this massive aquarium pool all woke up as they felt the presence of a legendary. They all turned to the sinking green Pokemon before they all began to swim around him. Soon Ash made it close to the bottom of the pool, but he stopped just before impacting the ground with all the Pokemon still swimming around him. Unknown to the water Pokemon, something else was happening with Ash. Hello. Ash heard a female voice. He did not know where it was coming from as he could see nothing, but he felt the urge to respond. Hello. Who are you? Where are you? My name is Ash, but I don't know where I am. What's your name? Name. What's a name? Like what do people call you? Single quote. I don't know. You're an Ash, right? Yeah. Then am I an Ash? Are we Ash? Hey, no, that's my name. Don't you have a name? No, but what are we? What do you mean? Also, where are you? I don't know. It's dark. It's always dark. And wet. When I hear voices, I hurt. Are you going to hurt me? No. I don't want to hurt you. But what did you mean by, what are we? You feel familiar. You feel like me. What are we? Ash could feel desperation coming from her and didn't know how to help. I don't know. Where are you? Ash, I'm scared. Where are you? Maybe I can help. I don't know. I like you, Ash. I wish I could see you. Single quote. I wish I could see you. Can you find me? I don't like the dark. I will. I hope I find you soon. And when I do, maybe I can help you think of a name. Name. I would like that. I don't know what I am. Where am I? Who am I? Hello. Single quote. Single quote. Hello. Find me. Gardevoir opened her eyes as her emotion sensing caught something small. She turned on the bed before noticing that Ash was not in the bed. Her eyes went wide as she pushed off the bed. The action caused Pikachu and Eevee to wake up, and as they realized the same thing the psychic type did, they were now just as awake. Gardevoir looked around the room before her eyes caught sight of the pajamas on the ground. She grew even more worried as she got out of the bed and moved to Aveline and shook her awake. What? Aveline opened her eyes and saw her Pokemon standing over her. The first thing she realized was the panicked look on Gardevoir's face, and this brought her out of her sleepy state before she bolted into a sitting position. Her eyes immediately went to Ash's bed and saw what the others did. She also began to worry before whispering to the Pokemon, "We have to find him." Seeing the Pokemon nod, they all turned to the door to see that it was open wide. They didn't hesitate and ran out into the hall while trying to stay as quiet as possible. For 20 minutes they ran all over the gym, to see if they could find any trace of him. They had split up to cover more ground as they needed to rush. Aveline was now at the entrance of the gym as she contemplated whether she should go outside to find him. She was on her 5th step towards the door when Pikachu came up to her, calling her out in a whisper yell. She looked down to see the mouse Pokemon was with Eevee and Gardevoir as they all pointed in a direction. Thinking that they must have found him, she spoke, "Where is he?" The Pokemon all began to make their way back towards where they found Ash. After a few minutes of chasing the Pokemon, Aveline, they came to a stop with Aveline looking around to see if she could see a hint of his green tail, but she saw nothing. She looked to the Pokemon and asked, "Well, where?" She got her answer when Gardevoir pointed towards the aquarium window and she looked to where she was pointing. It was there that she saw a group of water Pokemon swimming around Ash, who was amazingly still sleeping. Aveline felt her legs buckle as she saw that Ash was safe. She fell to her knees as she sighed in relief, "Thank Arceus." After a minute, trying to regain the feeling in her legs, she got up and looked around to see if there was a way to the top of the aquarium. She found a door that led to it and made her way with the Pokemon following her. Once she was at the top, she looked down at the water before she spoke, "Gardevoir, can you bring him up?" Gardevoir nodded before she used her psychic powers to lift Ash out of the water. She moved Ash towards Aveline as she saw the human hover her arms outstretched. Aveline gently grabbed Ash and smiled as he was still asleep. She rubbed his wet fur before speaking. "You are so much trouble, Ash. Do you know that?" Ash merely grumbled in his sleep. Pikachu and Eevee gave a sigh of relief at the fact that their trainer was fine, though they wondered why he ended up there. Aveline looked to Gardevoir and spoke, "Help me, please." The Pokemon nodded as she used her powers to lift Ash into the air and levitated him back to his room. "Let's get you dried up and back to bed." This sounded like a great idea to all of them as they were tired from what they just went through. Behind a visor, a pair of glowing blue eyes gazed hard straight ahead. Again, something is out there, but what is it? Next day, morning. The group had hit the road again first thing in the morning as they wanted to use the day as best they can. Ash yawned as he rubbed his eyes from how sleepy he was. Bach chuckled at this as he asked, "Rough night?" Ash shook his head, "Nah. I just feel like I had a weird dream." He tried to remember what the dream was about, but for some reason, it seemed very vague. Something about finding something. Misty sighed as she was looking at a Pokeball. "Hey Ash, are you sure I should have taken this one? I mean, it's..." Ash smiled as he looked back at her. "Trust me, Misty. You will love having it on your team." Misty sighed as she put the ball away. "If you say so." Aveline smiled as she looked to Misty. "Trust us, Misty. With the proper care, that Pokemon your sisters found will be a welcome addition to your team." Misty looked back down at the ball and smiled. "If you say it will, then I can't wait to see it." Ash smiled before looking at Brock. "Hey, Brock, are we going in the right direction?" Brock pulled out a map and looked it over. "Yep. It's a long trip, but it's also a straightforward path." Ash smiled as he pumped his fist in the air. "Then let's go." Pikachu and Eevee cheered with him as the group continued to make their way to their next destination.
Hey guys, if you like this video, please do one thing, like it, share it with your those friends who love to watch Pokemon or any fanfic of anime which are related to specific genres. So please do that and turn on the bell icon for notification of these any other series which are still ongoing on channel. Thanks for watching.